Our gracious God and Father, we thank you for today. We thank you for your grace. Thank you for your word. Thank you for everyone who's here. And Lord, for those who may still be on their way, we pray for safety. And of course, we lift up those on the coast, those in Latin America and other places, Lord, that have been hit by the storm. Pray for recovery, for courage, and for comfort as well, particularly for those who may have lost a loved one or a friend. And Lord, give us strength, give us wisdom and insight today as we study your word. I pray that you will make everything clear. For we need you in everything and in all ways. And we ask all this in Jesus' wonderful name. Amen. Amen. Well, welcome to Zion's Hope Studio Electives. For those who don't know, my name is Michael. I'm the social media manager, one of the videographers, photographers, and I do teach the sessions here in the Studio Electives. And enjoy doing it, and we hope that it's a blessing to you guys too, by the way, and that you're able to pass along everything that you're able to learn. As most of you know, and most watching know, Zion's Hope is known as a pre-wrath ministry. We believe in the pre-wrath view of the end times. And I know some of you hold that, some of you may not, that's fine. This is not the mid-trib position. This is not the post-trib position. It is different. And those are actually different views regarding the end times. But before we go on, I do want to mention there is going to be a test at the end of the day, and I am serious. I am actually going to ask you to explain our topic today. And our topic is an easy way to explain the pre-wrath rapture position. Now, there's a lot of text that we could go over. I'm not including all of them there because I'm trying to just kind of condense it down and give you a summary, basically a 5-point outline for what we're going to be discussing today. So again, just to warn you again, there will be a test at the end, and I'm going to ask you all to explain the pre-wrath position to me. Now, I know some of you are very well versed in it, so I want to make sure everybody has an opportunity to do that. I'm going to explain more than you need to know. That's what a teacher does. But we're just going to look at 5 passages today. So even if you don't hold this view, thank you for being here, thank you for watching and for listening, by the way, but you too need to know what this view actually does state. So if somebody asks you about it, you can explain it to them. You know, whether you're a Bible study teacher, maybe you work at a church, or maybe just, enjoy talking about end times to your family and friends. It's an important way to, it's important to understand, what the topic is you're discussing. So I hope this is going to be helpful today for you. So first, I'm going to give a summary about what we're going to talk about, and then we're going to go through some things. Now, on one of my mission trips to China, now for those who know, I've been to China a few times. I lived in Japan for a couple years. I was traveling with a brother in Christ. He was a pastor, a friend of mine. We worked on some ministry work here in Central Florida. And out of nowhere, he asked me, Michael, I want you to tell me why you hold to the pre-wrath position in 2 minutes. Okay. So by the grace of God, I was able to explain it within that time frame, fairly quickly. Just a brief overview. So by God's grace, I was able to do that by focusing on a few passages, a few topics, particularly the day of the Lord or God's wrath. So I want to kind of flesh out that discussion today for what we're doing. So first, again, I'm going to give a summary similar to what I did. And then second, we're going to go through 5 passages, of course, a little bit more detail than you need, in order to help you understand the view, but also to explain it to other people. Now, the pre-wrath view states that there's a 7-year period. It's not called the tribulation. The Bible doesn't call it that. It calls it Daniel's 70th week. And halfway through this time frame, 3.5 years, a man we call the Antichrist is going to set himself up in Jerusalem, in the temple, whatever the temple is. And there's going to be an image there, and he's going to demand to be worshipped as God. This is known as the abomination of desolation. And those who refuse, of course, he's going to start hunting down. This is called the Great Tribulation. This is the satanic persecution of Christians and Jews during this time. During this persecution, there's going to be cosmic disturbances. And then, of course, the rapture and the pouring out of God's wrath and what we know as the day of the Lord. So that's just a basic summary of the pre-wrath position. Now we're going to kind of get a little bit more detail about what this position actually states. So, this basic summary, I hope, was a good foundation. So I need to ask, are you ready? Yes. Let me ask again. Are you ready? Yes. Okay, there we go. So deep breath. So we're going to highlight these 5 passages. Number 1, Daniel 9:24 through 27. This, of course, is familiar with anybody who's been around Zion's Hope for any amount of time. They call it the backbone of prophecy. This is Daniel's 70th week in the Antichrist. Now, I'm trying to link the passages together that we're going through. That way you can see the connection between these. At least, again, I hope so. So if you have your Bibles or your phones or your tablets, go ahead and feel free to turn to Daniel 9. I do have the text up here, and just for safety or for time's sake. So let's go ahead and read these verses here. Daniel 9, 24 through 27. 70 weeks have been decreed for your people and your holy city, to finish the transgression, to make an end of sin, to make atonement for iniquity, to bring in everlasting righteousness, to seal up vision and prophecy, and to anoint the most holy or the most holy place. So you, Daniel, are to know and discern that from the issuing of a decree to restore and rebuild Jerusalem until Messiah the Prince, there will be 7 weeks and 62 weeks. It will be built again with plaza and moat, even in times of distress. Then, after 62 weeks, the Messiah will be cut off and have nothing. And the people of the Prince who is to come will destroy the city and the sanctuary. And his end will come with a flood. Even to the end there will be war. Desolations are determined. And he will make a firm covenant with many for 1 week, but in the middle of the week, 7 years, he will put a stop to sacrifice and grain offering, and on the wing of abominations will come the one who makes desolate, even until a complete destruction, one that is decreed, is poured out on the one who makes desolate. These verses are the foundation for many who hold a literal 1,000 years view of the reign and rule of Christ during what we call the millennium. Now, not everyone believes that. We've talked about some of that before. But for those who are futurists, whether they're pre-trib, mid-trib, whatever, it's a good start, because it's good to start with a passage everyone's familiar with, or at least has some kind of understanding of, so they can connect with other things that you're going to be talking about. And of course, that connection is a 7-year period, which is still yet future, called Daniel's 70th week. Now, you would have a different discussion with somebody who denies a literal 7 years at the end. That's a whole other topic. But I'm also going to be using some graphics throughout, because I'm a visual person. Anybody else visual besides me? Okay, good. I want to make sure I'm not the only one here. So I'm going to not only talk about it, but I'm going to show it to you visually here on this. So just very quickly, Daniel's 70th week, 7 years. Make sense? Okay, just want to make sure that makes sense. 7 years are decreed. Now, this begins when the Antichrist signs this covenant. Okay, this, of course, hasn't happened yet. We don't know who the Antichrist is as of yet, but this is what will take place at that time. So it's important to see this again visually when it comes to these things. Now, I just want to remind you, the Bible does not call this time frame the tribulation. You will not find that terminology used in the Bible for this 7-year period. Now, there is the Great Tribulation, which we'll look at here in just a little bit. But right now we're looking at Daniel's 70th week and the Antichrist. So here is just a 7-year period. And then, again, it begins with the signing of this covenant. And this starts with this time frame. It could also be a reaffirmation of a covenant already in place. There is that possibility linguistically there in the text. Then there's something that happens halfway through. We saw that in the text just a few minutes ago. So we have the midpoint, called the abomination of desolation. Now, halfway through, again, he stops the sacrifices, he stops the offerings, he sets up the abomination of desolation, which Paul talks about. 2 Thessalonians 2, Daniel 11 also discusses that same topic. Now, you can do that study on your own time, but I just wanted to make mention of those texts for you. Now, when he does this, it's not going to be an easy time for people. We'll get to that in just a minute, but I just want to make sure you understand there's a 7-year period. Halfway through, this abomination of desolation takes place. So that actually cuts the 7 years in 2 halves, right? 3.5 years, 3.5 years, okay? Yep. I just want to make sure everything is clear. Again, we're trying to get back to basics here, not trying to make it too complicated. And also, too, the text says that he will be judged. And here at the end, the text says that he will be judged there at the end. So, just to reiterate, 7 years begins with this signing of a covenant or reaffirmation of one. Halfway through, the midpoint, a man we call the Antichrist stops the sacrifices. Okay, does that make sense? Does everybody understand? Do this if you understand, and do this if you don't. Okay, just want to make sure. So that's Daniel's 70th week and just the man we know as the Antichrist. Our next text is Matthew 24. Again, very familiar with those who have been with Zion Soap. Now, the full text is 15 through 31. I'm not going to read all of that. I'll just read some selected verses because we're going to look at 3 different topics here. Now, Matthew 24 and 25 is what we know as the Olivet Discourse. This is what Jesus said when he was on the Mount of Olives. In some sense, he was also talking about 70 AD, but that was a foreshadowing of the second coming of Christ. Now, I did a series on Antiochus and the Antichrist. I talked about preterism a few weeks ago. So you can, whenever those get up online, you can go ahead and look at those. But here, Jesus is telling his disciples, and by application us, what to look for prior to his return. Now, we're going to look at 3 topics within these texts, within this big text here, and the corresponding verses. So the first one is what I've already mentioned, the abomination of desolation. Because Jesus himself mentions this. That's in verses 15 and 16 of Matthew 24. The text says this: "Therefore, when you see," this is not a spiritual thing, this is a physical thing they see, "the abomination of desolation, which was spoken through Daniel the prophet," we just read the text, "standing in the holy place," let the reader understand, "then those who are in Judea must flee to the mountains." In other words, run for your life. So here we have a text where Jesus actually refers to Daniel 9. He's connecting these things together, and the abomination of desolation. Now, this was pictured by Antiochus Epiphanes in 168 BC. What did he do? Anybody remember what he did? Sacrificed a pig. What else did he do? Brought a pig. Demanded to be worshipped. Image of himself. The image of Zeus with his face on it, in the most holy place. Demanded the Jews worship that. And you know what? Many followed. Many did. Some didn't. Of course, the Maccabees said, we're not doing that. But Jesus himself says this is going to happen again. It's going to take place again. So Jesus actually puts this connection between the abomination of desolation and his return. And it's important to keep that connection. And just as a reminder, this abomination of desolation is when the Antichrist will go into this new temple structure, whatever it is, in Jerusalem, set up an image of himself, demand to be worshipped as God, just as Antiochus did. So again, we see this parallel, and as a reminder, the Jewish thought is the same prophetic event can happen over and over and over again. Some call it a near-far, but there can actually be more than 2 fulfillments of a prophetic event within Jewish theology. So I think that's helpful to understand too. So here is this situation. Now let's look at this visually. And Jesus calls this first part the beginning of sorrows, which I have it up here. And he said, those who are in Judea must run when this abomination of desolation takes place. Well, why would he say that? Well, this begins the great tribulation, or the tribulation, the great one. Again, let's look at the text. Don't take my word for it. Look at what the Bible says. Verses 21 through 22. For then there will be great tribulation, such has not occurred since the beginning of the world until now, nor ever will. That's important. That's an important little phrase there. Unless those days had been cut short, no life would have been saved. But for the sake of the elect, those days will be cut short. So Jesus says, he tells us when this great tribulation begins. And when is that? After the abomination of desolation. Everybody makes sense? Everything makes sense. Again, we're just trying to go step by step here. So it begins after this abomination where Antichrist sets himself up in the temple to be worshipped. So again, let's look at this visually. So here we have this covenant signed or reaffirmed. The beginning of sorrows take place, although that could be extended, some say. Halfway through this midpoint, the abomination of desolation is set up. For those who refuse to bow down to this Antichrist, it begins the great tribulation, the great persecution. Thlipsis, pressure, difficulty, problems, sorrow. Being hunted down because you refuse to bow. And that's actually happening around the world today for many Christians, by the way. And we need to pray for them. So again, for those who deny this request, deny his request, or command rather, great pressure, tribulation, suffering, persecution begins for them, both Jews and Christians. And anybody else who says, who are you? I'm not bound before you. And Jesus says this is going to be the worst persecution that the Jews particularly will have ever experienced. Remember, Zechariah says 2/3 of the Jewish population is going to be murdered during this time. Again, pictured in 70 AD, but also in the Holocaust. 6 million Jews were murdered. And this wasn't that long ago. So easily we forget. But Jesus himself says this great tribulation is going to be worse. The worst that has ever been seen. Worse than 70 AD when over 1 million Jews were slaughtered. Worse than Hitler. 6 million Jews. These two historical events are going to pale in comparison to what's going to happen during the Great Tribulation, the persecution of this Antichrist. It's a very big wake-up call, by the way, for those of us who do know Christ to share Christ during this time. Now, Jesus then warns about false messiahs. He says his return is going to be obvious, verses 27 and 28. We won't get into that. But he says these days of the Great Tribulation are going to be cut short. They're going to be stopped. They're going to be amputated. And then we're going to see the sign. But immediately after, so again, we see these timing words. Then, after the Great Tribulation, contextually, the word great is not in there, I just inserted that to help you understand that. Of those days, the sun will be darkened, and the moon will not give its light, and the stars will fall from the sky. And the powers of the heavens will be shaken. And then, see this progression here? Event. The sign of the Son of Man will appear in the sky, and then all the tribes of the earth will mourn. And they will see the Son of Man coming in the clouds of the sky with power and great glory. Now, Jesus quotes some Old Testament scriptures here. Important to understand that. We'll get to that here in just a minute. So let's just look at our graphic one more time. There's a 7-year period, beginning with this Antichrist signing or reaffirming a covenant. Halfway through is the abomination of desolation, the midpoint, where he sets himself up, says, worship me as God. People say no, and this great tribulation begins. But Jesus says there's going to be an event that cuts this short. And what is that event? Cosmic disturbances. The sun will go dark, the moon will not shed its light, etc., etc. And he actually is quoting Joel 2:31 here. So when does Jesus put these cosmic disturbances? We have to think about that. Is it at the beginning of the 7 years? No. Is it in the midpoint of the 7 years? No. It's after the Great Tribulation, after the persecution, after the difficulty, after the great pressure that people will go through at that time. So all these timing things are extremely important to understand. And then, of course, the appearance, the sign occurs after this. We won't get into that. That's another topic. You can study that on your own time. But this next event is what we're going to focus on because Jesus talks about it, right? What are these cosmic disturbances? That brings us to the next section. Joel 2, verses 30 through 32. Cosmic disturbances. This is what Jesus quoted. So let's go to the text. Again, don't take my word for it. God says this, actually should be Joel 2, 30 through 32. I will display wonders in the sky and on the earth, blood, fire, and columns of smoke. The sun will be turned into darkness and the moon into blood before the great and awesome day of the Lord comes. And it will come that whoever calls on the name of the Lord will be delivered or saved. For on Mount Zion and in Jerusalem there will be those who escape. As the Lord had said, even among the survivors whom the Lord calls. So again, one more time, let's look a little bit more at this graphic. There's a 7-year period. This covenant supposed to be. Antichrist breaks that covenant halfway through. He sets himself up as God, demands to be worshipped. Christians, Jews, others say, no, we're not going to worship you. The Great Tribulation begins. It's cut short by these cosmic disturbances. Right? Make sense? Everybody make sense? Okay. Just want to make sure that, I know I'm going a little fast, but I want to make sure everybody understands. And Jesus and Joel say this. So, based upon the text, do these cosmic disturbances go before or after the day of the Lord, God's judgment? Before. So let's look at this. So these cosmic disturbances precede, they occur before, because Joel has that word there, we'll look at that in just a second, the day of the Lord or God's wrath. That's really important to understand. Now, there are those who will take these verses as hyper-literal. There's going to be things that, a star is going to fall from, well, if you ever seen what a star actually is, look at the sun. If the sun hit the earth, the earth is gone. This is Jewish apocalyptic literature. We have to be very careful not to take this too hyper literally, because that's actually very dangerous. But this is Jewish apocalyptic literature to say how horrible, how obvious these things are going to be at that time. Jesus mentioned all this in Matthew 24, and this is the logical next step in your discussion when you're talking to somebody about this. Again, going from Daniel to Matthew 24, now to Joel 2. Again, we're just going in a step-by-step process here. And God says he's going to display this wonders in the sky, on earth, blood, fire, smoke. Again, this is apocalyptic language. It's going to be very obvious. There's going to be signs in the heavens. The sun's going to go dark. The moon's going to turn to blood. Now, this is not talking about blood moons. But put in simple terms, everything is going to go dark. You go out of your room sometime. At night, you go out of the house, you turn the lights off, right? You go back in the house, click, you turn the lights on. This is going to be everything going dark. God's going to flip the switch of the universe on earth. And believe me, it's going to get people's attention. Has anybody here ever been in darkness? Like darkness, where you literally cannot see your hand in front of your face. That is one of the eeriest feelings that you can imagine. Like, I can't move because if I do, I'm going to stub my toe, I'm going to trip, I'm going to fall over something. I don't know what to do. There's just this uneasiness about it. And it's going to be even worse here because it's going to be worldwide. It's going to be worldwide. So, Joel mentions a very crucial timing word. And what is that word? Before. Everything's going to go dark before God's wrath falls, before the day of the Lord occurs. So again, let me just go back to our little graphic here just to highlight this. So we have these beginning of the sorrows, then halfway through the 7 years, the abomination of desolation, initiating the great tribulation, and then that's cut short by these cosmic disturbances before God's wrath, before the day of the Lord. Everything makes sense so far. Again, I'm just kind of going through this basically because we're going to get to your turn here in a minute. You haven't gotten there yet, so I hope you're paying attention. So something to understand here. Therefore, God's wrath cannot fall until these cosmic signs occur. That's what the text says more than once. This is a critical part for explaining the pre-wrath position and defending the pre-wrath position. God's judgment does not happen until after things go dark, and that is well into Daniel's 70th week. We don't know exactly the timing, but they will end as it happens. Now, there is another event connected to this that Paul talks about, and that is in 1 Thessalonians 4 and 5. Rapture and wrath. So again, let's look at our little graphic here. 7 years up to these cosmic disturbances. And before that, of course, the Great Tribulation occurs and everything takes place. But these cosmic disturbances, again, occur before God's wrath falls. Very key to understanding this. Before the day of the Lord. But this event is something that Paul talks about in 1 Thessalonians. We'll look at verses 15 through 17 in chapter 4. And Paul says this. I'm not going to read the whole chapters. You can read that on your own time. For this we say to you by the word of the Lord, that we who are alive and remain until the coming of the Lord will not precede those who have fallen asleep or died. For the Lord himself will descend from heaven with a shout, with the voice of the archangel, with the trumpet of God, and the dead in Christ shall rise first. Then we who are alive and remain will be caught up, and we get the word rapture from the Latin word, caught up together with them in the air, in the air of the clouds, to meet the Lord in the air, and so we shall always be with the Lord. Then skipping down to 1 Thessalonians 5:2, for you yourselves know full well that the day of the Lord will come just like a thief in the night. Now, verses 3 through 8, Paul contrasts those who are lost, the unbelieving world, and those who are found, believers. Who's going to be surprised? The lost will be. He says they will be surprised. They are in darkness. You're not. You're in light. You're sons of the day. Therefore, that will not take you by surprise. Paul says that specifically in this text. So the lost are going to be surprised by this judgment that comes in the day of the Lord. But we, the found, will not be taken by surprise, because we're told to watch, to be aware, to be alert, to be thinking about what's going on. Then he says in verse 9, "For God has not destined us for wrath, but for obtaining salvation," or physical deliverance, "through our Lord Jesus Christ." So here we have again, this salvation deliverance, physical deliverance, is not spiritual, it is physical. And we call it the rapture. Previously mentioned in chapter 4, by the way. God will rescue his own in the rapture and then pour out his wrath on the unbelieving world. And Jesus himself sets this precedence, by the way, in Matthew 24, in Luke 17. Let me just read a little bit of that to you here. Luke 17, talking about the end times. And he refers to Noah. He talks about Noah. Verse 27. I'll just go back up to verse 26 in Luke 17. "And just as it happened in the days of Noah, so it will also be in the days of the Son of Man. And they," that is the unbelieving world, "they were eating, they were drinking, they were marrying, giving in marriage, until the day that Noah entered the ark and the flood came and destroyed them all." Same principle with Sodom and Gomorrah. God rescued Lot. The same day, what happened? God's wrath fell. Noah went into the ark. God closed the door. The same day, God's wrath fell. It's the same principle what Paul's talking about here. There's God's rescuing, and then his wrath falls the same day. The same day. So this salvation, this deliverance, is going to take place. Now let me just go back over here to add part of our graphic here. So let me come on this side, make sure everybody can see. So we have how many years? 7 year. Okay, good. And that starts with what? Antichrist signing the covenant, good. And of course, Jesus calls this first part the beginning of sorrows. And then halfway through, something happens. What happens? The abomination of desolation, which is what? The Antichrist sets himself up, demands to be worshipped as God. And of course, there's an image involved with that. We saw that Revelation talks about that too. Again, that's at the midpoint. Then, of course, people say no. And when people say no, something else happens. And we call that what? The Great Tribulation. Persecution flips us, again, pressure. And then that's cut short by cosmic disturbance, but something else happens at that time too. And that's what we call the Pre-Wrath Rapture. Because God's wrath has not fallen yet. That comes next. And that is what we call also the day of the Lord. Revelation 6, 12 through 17, the day of the Lord. Now, before we get to the text, Revelation 6 parallels Matthew 24. So again, you can go back, and Zion's Hope has a lot of wonderful materials, videos, articles, magazine talks about that. You can go back and look and study that on your own time. We have videos online, by the way, for that too. But in chapters 5 and 6, Jesus is doing what? He's opening the 7-sealed scroll, 1 seal at a time. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. The 5th seal is martyrs who were murdered during the Great Tribulation. You find that in Revelation 6, 9 through 11. But then we come to seal 6, the 6th seal. I looked when he broke the 6th seal, and there was a great earthquake. And the sun became black as sackcloth made of hair, and the whole moon became like blood. Hey, we've seen that before. And the stars of the sky fell to the earth as a fig tree casts its unripe figs when shaken by a great wind. The sky was split apart like a scroll when it is rolled up, and every mountain and island moved out of their places. Then the kings of the earth, and the great men, and the commanders, and the rich, and the strong, and every slave, and every free man, that is, every human being, hid themselves in the caves and among the rocks of the mountains. And they said to the mountains and to the rocks, "Fall on us, and hide us from the presence of him who sits on the throne, and from the wrath of the Lamb, for the great day of their wrath has come. And who is able to stand?" So for those who say the wrath of God occurs at the beginning of the undoing of the seals of the scroll, it doesn't happen until seal 6. That's exactly what the text says. So again, we see this quoting in reference to Joel chapter 2, Matthew 24, and even a subtle reference to what Paul wrote. That is, God's wrath is going to surprise people who don't know the Lord. They were doing their everyday life. Then all of a sudden, boom, everything goes dark. Something's happening. What's going to happen? Oh no, we're in trouble now. As a new dad who's trying to teach his son not to do things that are wrong, which you have to like 3 million times. Is that normal? Yeah, okay, I just want to make sure. He knows when he's in trouble. I say, Daniel, don't do that. No. And sometimes he'll be like, okay. He knows he's done so. He's learning. So pray he learns fast, please. So just as Daniel's learning, these people will know who are alive at that time, we're in trouble. Where did the sun go? What's happening? And then, of course, God's wrath is going to fall. So it is in the sixth seal we find God's wrath. Well, again, remember, it falls after the cosmic disturbances, after the rapture, after the midpoint of Daniel's 70th week, after the start of the 7-year period when the Antichrist signs this covenant. So let's look at this again graphically. So here again we have Daniel's 70th week. 7-year period begins with the signing of this covenant. Halfway through, the Antichrist says, worship me, sets up this image. And by the way, the false prophet says it makes it speak of somehow, some way, we don't know just yet, which initiates the Great Tribulation. That's cut short. God's wrath hasn't fallen yet. Cosmic disturbances, the rapture occurs, and then God's wrath falls on the day of the Lord. So it's just a very basic summary of this. So we just covered 5 texts, within, 30 minutes or so, 35 minutes. And I did that quickly on purpose because now it's your turn. So, everybody clear your throats. Grab a drink. Because I'm going to have you explain this to me. Now, I've got the verses up here, by the way, and you have them there too. So first of all, we have Daniel 9, 24 through 27, Daniel's 70th week of the Antichrist. So tell me, what occurs in Daniel 9? Just give me, it doesn't have to be a elongated thing. So what happens? The Antichrist signs a covenant. Good. Then what? 7 years start. He's 7 years starts. Very good. Very good. And then something happens halfway through. Remember, Daniel 9 said that too. The abomination of desolation occurs halfway through Daniel's 70th week. Okay, so we come to our next text, Matthew 24. The full text is 15 through 31, but I'm highlighting the Great Tribulation here, even though there's a few other events. Jesus talks about the abomination of desolation. Now, explain to me briefly what that is. What is the abomination of desolation? Okay, Antichrist sets himself up. Yep. To be worshipped. He calls him, he says, I am God, 2 Thessalonians 2. Paul's very clear on that. And then, of course, people say, no, what are you, nuts? I'm not going to do that, even though many will. And then that starts what? The Great Tribulation. And what is that? All kinds of persecution. Running for your life. That's why Jesus said, run. Those who are in Judea, flee. Run away. Because there's going to be satanic persecution like the which you've never seen before and will never be again. This is going to be completely unique in history. And then, of course, we have the cosmic disturbances and the sign which Jesus mentions. And that brings us to Joel 3, right? Which actually, I'm sorry, it should be Joel 2. I forgot to change it on there. Verses 30 through 32. Cosmic disturbances. Now, what happens here? Darkness. Everything goes dark. Click, great earthquake. Click, everything goes dark. And people say, something's happening. Something's going on. This is weird. Now I can imagine what media is going to say. Oh, the aliens have arrived, or some kind of weird stuff. Who knows what they're going to say or come up with. Fake news. And that brings us also to 1 Thessalonians 4 and 5, the rapture and God's wrath. Because Paul talks about this connection, as of course Jesus does too, and then God's wrath, which is the day of the Lord. Now, does the rapture happen before or after God's wrath? Before. That's what the text says. Again, we're just going by what the text says. And then God's wrath falls in an event we call what? The day of the Lord. Revelation 6, 12 through 17. So, within about 2 minutes, using some of these verses, you just gave a basic summary of the pre-wrath position. So again, just step by step. Daniel, Matthew, Joel, 1 Thessalonians, and Revelation 6. So let's put, now for those of us who are visual, if you like to draw this out like on a graph, you can do that too. Draw it out 7 years, halfway through, Great Tribulation, Day of the Lord, Rapture, cosmic disturbances, everything like that. You can do that too. And it's actually quite helpful to be able to do that for some folks. So again, draw it out, 7-year period, halfway through, Antichrist sets himself up to be worshipped, demands to be worshipped. There's this image. Whatever temple is going to be there in Jerusalem, we don't know just yet. We haven't, we're not there yet. And of course, the mark of the beast occurs in that time too, by the way. It hasn't come yet. And then of course, there's cosmic disturbances, rapture occurs, then God's wrath falls. So kind of put in simple terms, that's the pre-wrath view of the rapture. Does everything make sense? Everything makes sense. I just want to make sure everybody, again, do this if you don't understand. Okay, I'm looking around, making sure. Okay, I don't see anybody nodding their head no. I see a question over here. Yes, sir?
In your studies, how far off are we from this all starting?
We don't know. We don't know. I think there's some events that still need to take place first. I know that peace, of course, is brewing in the Middle East with Israel and other nations. I think that's very key. I think that's very crucial. I know David's talked about that. And I think watching Saudi Arabia is extremely important when it comes to that too. So I would encourage you to keep watching Israel, because whether we like it or not, prophecy is not based upon what happens in America. It is not based upon what happens in Russia. It is not based upon what happens in Europe. It is not based upon what happens in Asia. It's based upon what happens in Jerusalem to the Israelites, the Jews. So, as we wrap things up here, our topic has been a little bit different today. I like to mix things up. And we need to know what we believe about end times, particularly now as we are continuing to get closer and closer to the end events of history as we know it. So whether or not, again, you agree with this view or not, you need to know what it actually states and what the actual belief is about that. We need to know why we believe our view of end times, whatever it is. We also need to know what we believe about a lot of other factors too. The person of Christ, salvation by grace through faith, the reality of heaven and hell, that works cannot save anyone, the Trinity, the triunity of God. All these doctrines are also extremely important for us to understand. So we need to ask, what do I believe? And why do I believe it? Don't believe something just because somebody told you. Oh, my pastor told me. Well, your pastor can be wrong. I'm a pastor. I can be wrong. I've been wrong on a lot of things. I'm still a newly married man. Believe me, I'm learning how wrong I am on a lot of things. So if somebody asked you, how can I go to heaven? Can you tell them in 2 minutes? If somebody says, why do you believe Jesus is God? Can you go to the Bible and explain that to them? If somebody asked you, why do you believe salvation is by faith? Can you defend that? If somebody says, who is God and how can I know him? Can you tell them? These kinds of things are extremely important, but as time goes on, we need to know what we believe and why we believe it. Because the persecution's coming. And for some has already been here. And we need to be aware of these things and be ready for that, because Christians will face persecution. So I challenge all of us, including myself, now more than ever, really, truly, sincerely get into the Scriptures, get into the Word of God, study it, find out what it says, find out what you believe and why you believe it. And don't just believe something because somebody told you or because it's popular. Know what you believe as a workman who needs not be ashamed. Let's pray. Our Father in God, we thank you for your word. We thank you, Lord, again for your grace and your mercy. Thank you, Lord, that you've outlined the end times for us. Now, we wish everything was all together in one passage. We wish that was the case, but that's not what you've done. So we do need to do some studying. We do need to do some digging. Now, there's a lot of other aspects we haven't talked about, a lot of things I haven't mentioned. Of course, there's details that we didn't go over. But Lord, I pray this skeletal overview of this pre-wrath rapture view has been helpful for everyone. So Lord, help us to flesh out these things. Help us to flesh out our own beliefs, to make the faith our own, to love you, to serve you, to honor you, to praise you, to worship you, and to proclaim Christ where we are now, around the world. So Lord, give us opportunities. Help us to know you, to follow you, and to trust you in these difficult times that we are facing and that we will face. So Lord, may you be glorified in our lives, and teach us in Jesus' name. Amen. Amen.
Go deeper in your understanding of God, His people, and His plan for planet Earth. Zion's Fire magazine is an exceptional resource with powerful insights from Scripture that provide a clear understanding of God's ultimate plan for the last days and the return of Jesus Christ. As a first-time subscriber, you'll receive a free 1-year subscription to Zion's Fire magazine with no strings attached. Request your free subscription by visiting our website or by calling our toll-free number, and we'll send you 6 free issues, 1 every other month, for a full year. We depend on the generosity of viewers like you to support the ongoing production of these programs. Your donation, whether large or small, is greatly appreciated. Donations may be given online at www.zionshope.org or by calling us toll-free at 1-888-781-9466. Stay informed and see the latest from Zion's Hope by liking us on Facebook, subscribing to our YouTube channel, and following us on Twitter.